what if the winter of 1859 didn't just bring snow to Europe? The flakes began falling on February 14th, 1859, Valentine's Day. But across the cobblestone streets of Paris, the white silence that typically blanketed the city carried with it something that would make lovers forget their promises and scholars question everything they thought they knew about the natural world. The snow was red, not pink, not tinted, blood red. From the frost-covered windows of Montmartre to the Gothic spires of Notre Dame, a crimson carpet descended from the gray February sky like scattered rose petals. But this was no romantic metaphor. This was something that defied explanation, something that would send ripples through the scientific community and leave behind evidence that we're only now beginning to understand. The official records speak of a weather anomaly. Dust from the Sahara, they said. Sand particles carried by unusual wind patterns, giving the precipitation its distinctive hue. The newspapers of the day reported it with the casual curiosity reserved for circus oddities. Yet beneath the bureaucratic explanations and journalistic dismissals lies a pattern of evidence that suggests something far more profound occurred during those 3 days in February 1859, because the red snow didn't just fall. It revealed. As the crimson blanket melted across France, Germany, and northern Italy, something began to emerge from beneath the earth. Not gradually, not through archaeological excavation, but suddenly, as if the strange precipitation had dissolved barriers that had kept secrets buried for centuries. Farmers noticed it first, dark openings in their fields where none had existed before. Openings that led down into carefully carved stone passages. The silence that followed these discoveries was deafening. Not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of authority deciding what could and could not be spoken. Picture the scene. A French vineyard owner named Henry de Boll walking through his property on February 17th, 3 days after the last crimson flake had fallen. The morning mist clings to the bare grape vines like ghostly fingers, and the ground beneath his boots squelches with the remnants of the strange snow. Where yesterday there had been solid earth, now there's a hole. Not a sinkhole, not a collapse from underground water erosion, but a perfectly rectangular opening lined with fitted stones that catch the weak winter light and reflect it back like polished marble. Henry peers down into the darkness. The air that rises from below carries no scent of soil or decay, but something else. Something metallic, sharp, clean. As his eyes adjust, he can make out the first few steps of what appears to be a staircase carved from single blocks of stone, descending into perfect blackness. This wasn't an isolated incident. Reports began filtering in from across the region. A similar opening in a wheat field near Reims, another beneath the courtyard of a monastery in Alsace, a fourth discovered by children playing in a Prague park, revealed when the red-stained snow melted away from what had appeared to be a simple garden fountain. Each discovery shared the same characteristics: rectangular entrances precisely cut into stone, staircases leading down at calculated angles, and air that seemed to flow upward from unseen depths, as if the earth itself were breathing through these newfound mouths. But here's where the story takes its first disturbing turn. Within 6 weeks of the red snow event, every one of these openings had been sealed. Not by natural processes, not by the gradual accumulation of debris, but by official intervention. Teams of workers appeared with horse-drawn carts loaded with cement and iron plates. The holes were filled, covered, and the surrounding ground was carefully restored to its original appearance. The workers spoke no local languages. They arrived without explanation and departed before dawn, leaving behind only the faintest traces of their presence, wheel ruts in the mud that led to roads that seemed to go nowhere, and residents with strict instructions to forget what they had seen. Yet photographs survive. Daguerreotypes captured by brave individuals who recognized the significance of what they were witnessing. Images that show passages carved with such precision that the joints between massive stone blocks are barely visible. Even when illuminated by the harsh magnesium flash of early photography, the stone itself defies simple classification. Geologists who examined samples before the sites were sealed described material that did not match any known quarries in the region. The surface bore tool marks, but not from chisels or hammers known to 19th century craftsmen. The cuts were too clean, too precise, as if the stone had been shaped by methods that left no texture, no roughness, no indication of the immense labor such carving should require. As winter gave way to spring in 1859, a second wave of discoveries began to surface. Not physical openings this time, but documents. Letters between government officials that had somehow escaped the usual administrative discretion. Correspondence that spoke of containment protocols and historical inconsistencies and the need to prevent public speculation about pre-existing infrastructure. One letter, preserved in the private archives of a Bavarian noble family, contains a phrase that cuts through the bureaucratic language like a blade. The underground network predates our current understanding of regional development by centuries. Exposure at this time would undermine established chronological frameworks. Underground network. Not isolated chambers, not random voids, but a network. A system. Something planned, constructed, and deliberately hidden beneath the surface of European civilization. The red snow, it seemed, hadn't created these passages. It had simply washed away whatever had been concealing them. But why red? Modern atmospheric science can explain colored precipitation through the presence of foreign particles, but the specific composition of the 1859 phenomenon remains a mystery. Analysis of surviving samples, preserved in the private collections of wealthy families who thought to keep such curiosities, reveals traces of iron oxide, which could explain the color, but also elements that should exist in Saharan dust. Microscopic examination shows crystalline structures that don't match any known mineral formations. The particles appear to have been processed, refined, manufactured rather than naturally occurring. As if the snow itself was a delivery system, a solution designed to dissolve specific materials that had been protecting or concealing the underground structures. The timeline becomes even more suspicious when we examine what happened next. Throughout the spring and summer of 1859, construction projects erupted across the affected regions. Not the slow, methodical building of typical infrastructure, but rapid, focused excavations that lasted only days before being abandoned or covered over. Official records describe these as geological surveys and foundation assessments for future development, but witnesses described something different. They spoke of workers who seemed to know exactly where to dig, who brought equipment unlike anything seen in conventional construction, and who removed materials from the ground rather than adding them. It was as if someone was conducting a massive salvage operation, extracting objects or information from the underground spaces before sealing them permanently. The weather patterns of early 1859 also deserve scrutiny. The red snow event wasn't preceded by any of the atmospheric conditions that typically transport Saharan dust to European latitudes. No major sandstorms were recorded in North Africa during the weeks leading up to the phenomenon. No unusual wind patterns were observed by the growing network of meteorological stations across the continent. Instead, the crimson precipitation appeared suddenly, fell for exactly 3 days across precisely defined geographic boundaries, and then ceased completely. The snow didn't gradually fade from red to pink to white as dust concentrations would naturally decrease. It simply stopped, as if controlled by a mechanism rather than natural forces. The geographic distribution is equally puzzling. The affected areas don't follow typical weather patterns or topographical features. Instead, they form a rough geometric pattern across Central Europe, connecting points that share no obvious relationship except for one. Each was later found to contain underground structures. Maps from the period show these locations connected by straight lines that ignore rivers, mountains, and political boundaries. Lines that suggest a planned network rather than random distribution. Lines that intersect at points where, decades later, major infrastructure projects would be built with unusual speed and efficiency. As the months passed following the red snow event, residents of the affected areas began reporting other anomalies. Sounds emerging from beneath the ground during quiet nights. Not the rumbling of earthquakes or the rush of underground water, but rhythmic patterns that seemed almost mechanical in nature. Children playing in areas where openings had been discovered and sealed claimed to feel vibrations through the solace of their feet, as if vast machines were operating far below the surface. Dogs and horses showed unusual behavior near these sites, refusing to walk over certain patches of ground or becoming agitated without apparent cause. The local folklore that emerged in the following years is particularly telling. Stories began circulating about the blood snow and its connection to ancient secrets buried beneath European soil. Tales of underground cities built by forgotten civilizations, of tunnels that connected distant regions, of chambers filled with knowledge that predated written history. But these weren't the usual gradual evolution of folk legends. They appeared suddenly, uniformly, across regions with different languages and cultural traditions. As if the stories weren't born from imagination, but from collective memory of something real that had been briefly exposed and then hidden again. The official response to these emerging legends was swift and coordinated. Educational authorities began emphasizing scientific explanations for unusual weather phenomena. Religious leaders preached sermons about the dangers of superstition and the importance of trusting established knowledge. Newspapers published articles debunking rural fantasies and promoting rational thinking, yet the photographs remain. The chemical analysis of the snow samples reveals their impossible composition. The sealed sites continue to emit the strange vibrations that sensitive instruments can still detect, and the pattern of subsequent construction projects continues to trace the same geometric lines across the European landscape. Perhaps most intriguingly, similar events have been recorded in other parts of the world, at other times throughout history. Always the same pattern, unusual precipitation in colors that nature doesn't typically produce, followed by the discovery of underground structures, followed by rapid official intervention and deliberate concealment. A crimson rainfall in Peru in 1687 that revealed stone passages beneath Inca ruins. Purple snow in Siberia in 1723 that exposed underground chambers near ancient burial sites. Golden rain in Egypt in 1453 that washed away sand from doorways carved into bedrock beneath the pyramids. Each event was documented by local observers, each was explained away by authorities, and each was followed by construction projects that seemed designed more to conceal than to build. The pattern suggests a global phenomenon, a systematic process of concealment and revelation that has been operating for centuries. The red snow of 1859 wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger cycle. A cycle in which underground infrastructure is periodically exposed and then deliberately hidden again. But who built these underground networks? The craftsmanship speaks of abilities that exceed anything attributed to the civilizations officially recognized as inhabiting these regions. During the periods when construction should have occurred, the precision of the stonework, the scale of the engineering, the coordination required to create passages spanning hundreds of miles. These achievements demand technologies and organizational structures that don't appear in any historical record. The tools marks found on the stones suggest methods of carving that leave no trace of the implements used. Modern engineers examining the photographs describe techniques that would require laser cutting, precision or acid etching capabilities that weren't developed until the 20th century. Yet the passages themselves show signs of age that indicate construction far predating the Industrial Revolution. The materials used present another mystery. Stone that doesn't match local geology, metals that contain alloy combinations unknown to 19th century metallurgy, and binding agents that create joints stronger than the stones they connect. These aren't the products of primitive societies working with crude tools. The air circulation systems discovered in some of the passages before they were sealed reveal engineering principles that weren't formally understood until the development of modern ventilation science. Fresh air flows through chambers hundreds of feet underground, maintained by pressure differentials that require precise calculations and sophisticated construction techniques. The geometric precision of the network layout suggests knowledge of advanced surveying methods and mathematical principles that weren't available to the civilizations that supposedly built these structures. The passages connect distant points with accuracy that requires instruments and measurement techniques that exceed anything available to ancient or medieval builders. All of this points to a conclusion that challenges our understanding of European history. These underground networks weren't built by any of the civilizations we've been taught inhabited these regions. They represent the work of a more advanced society, one whose existence has been systematically erased from official records. The red snow of 1859 provided a brief glimpse into this hidden past. For 3 days in February, the concealment failed, and humanity caught sight of infrastructure that shouldn't exist. But the forces responsible for hiding this evidence moved quickly to restore the veil of ignorance. The sealed openings, the intimidated witnesses, the coordinated explanations, the careful destruction of evidence, all indicate that the concealment wasn't accidental. Someone knew about these underground networks. Someone had been protecting the secret of their existence. And someone had the authority and resources to ensure that secret remained hidden. The question that emerges from this investigation isn't just about the identity of the original builders. It's about the identity of those who have been concealing their work. Who has the power to coordinate activities across multiple governments? Who has access to technologies that can selectively dissolve concealment materials while leaving everything else untouched? Who has the motivation to prevent humanity from learning about its forgotten past? The red snow event of 1859 wasn't a weather anomaly. It was a malfunction in a concealment system that has been operating for centuries, a system designed to keep humanity ignorant of the true history of our world. A system that failed for exactly 3 days, providing a window into a reality that powerful forces would prefer we never see. And if such a system exists, if such forces continue to operate, then what other secrets lie buried beneath the surface of our world? What other evidence of advanced ancient civilizations has been hidden from view? What other moments of accidental revelation have been covered up before the truth could spread? The crimson flakes that fell across Europe in February 1859 didn't just stain the snow. They stained history itself, leaving behind traces of a reality that official narratives struggle to explain. A reality in which the past is far more mysterious, far more advanced, and far more deliberately concealed than we've ever been allowed to imagine. The underground network revealed by the red snow still exists. The passages still extend beneath our feet. The chambers still echo with the whispers of forgotten knowledge. And somewhere the forces responsible for concealing this evidence continue their work, waiting for the next malfunction, preparing for the next cover-up. Because if the snow falls red again, if the concealment fails once more, humanity might finally learn the truth about what lies beneath our world. And that truth, apparently, is something that powerful interests believe we're not ready to handle. The question is, are they right?